Okay, good morning, everybody. Really happy to be able to meet with you all today. I just wanted to meet and kind of talk about the session, what's going on, and then what to expect for the last 8 weeks after the spring break. I do want to just say, overall, I think the session has been going pretty well. I think that's a testament to the leadership on both sides. I think Alex Riley is doing a fantastic job for us and has been working really well with the minority leader, Ashley. And I think overall, in terms of what we're doing in the chamber, has been the best I've seen in my 8 years here. And we've passed a number of pieces of bipartisan legislation that's gone to the Senate and I think has a good chance of passing. In fact, we've gotten 2 of the House bills done. Of course, the marriage and the divorce during pregnancy, that bill has been TAFP'd, and then today I expect will TAFP Ed Lewis's sex trafficking bill, which had bipartisan support. It was almost unanimous, and I've talked with Alex Riley this morning, and we plan to take that up today and TAFP that as well. If you recall, that's a pretty comprehensive sex trafficking legislation that protects minors, people that are being sex trafficked, and addresses those things. The Senate's made a few substantive changes, and we'll look at those today, but I expect that will be on the governor's desk by the end of the day. And then, of course, we're going to third read the income tax resolutions today. I expect that will pass pretty easily, probably anywhere from 90 to 100 votes, and get that over to the Senate. That's something that we've been working on for quite some time, have made that a priority, and I think that'll get over to the Senate today. On the matter of the income tax, I just think it's taken a while to do. We wanted to make sure we do it the right way. This is probably the most consequential thing that I've taken up in my 8 years here, and it just goes to show how important I think it is. But through the process, one of the things that's become very clear to me is when you try to do something really transformative, it's not easy. There are so many opposing forces, and just the inertia factor alone, it's just much easier to say, let's just do what we've been doing and hope for different results. And I just don't see it that way. I think the governor doesn't see it that way, and I think our membership on our side doesn't see it that way. And so I think this takes a bold step and takes it to the voters and says, do you want to look at doing this another way? One of the things that I've been struck by just like watching the news around the country is this is not a partisan issue. If you look at a state like Virginia, they are looking at expanding their sales tax base, talking about the exact same things that we're talking about, perhaps a tax on digital services, and just modernizing their tax base to reflect the life we live in 2026. And that is a Democratic legislature led by a Democratic governor who may be the Democratic nominee for president here in 3 years. And so I just don't see this as a partisan issue. Now, they're just doing it and raising taxes. We're looking at doing the same thing, but at the state level, lowering people's income taxes and eliminating them, and then at the local level, lowering people's property taxes, which is something that I think hasn't been stressed as much as it needs to be. Missourians will get a 2-for-1 benefit out of this, and if you look at what people are talking about back home, property taxes are probably the number one thing you hear about, especially people from Jackson County, and they will notice a benefit on the property tax level with this HJR as well if it passes. So I think that's very important. Talking with people back home, property taxes, property taxes, property taxes. People are still talking about that, and we've passed a number of pieces of legislation to address property taxes. Probably the one that comes to mind first would be the 2780. That was the special committee on property taxes. They traveled the state. That was their work product. It took a couple attempts to get that right. But eventually we were able to do it, and that bill also got wide bipartisan support, and was really happy to see that. One of my personal favorites is the bill we did yesterday, the personal property tax. I just don't think if you've owned a car for 12 years that you should have to pay personal property taxes to the government. I think at some point you should just own your car, and so that's a personal favorite of mine. So as we go out into spring break, I think we've been doing a good job in the House. We've passed a number of pieces of meaningful legislation. I think the time has come. I can tell our membership we're ready for a little bit of a break, and then when we come back, we have 8 weeks of this General Assembly for the regular session, and then a new one will come in. So I'm just going to wish all my members happy and safe spring break today. I think today will be a long day. We've got a number of House bills to third read, and then we have Senate bills that we're TAFPing, and House bills with Senate amendments. So it'll be a long day, and then we'll go out there. Hopefully all the members will have a safe and a restful spring break, and then come back ready to work in the last 8 weeks. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
On the income tax, there is still in the legislation a provision that says it is not subject to the restriction on taxes on motor fuels. 30B's in the Article 4 says that a tax on motor fuels only goes to highways, no matter what the tax is.
Right.
What is your statement to voters about whether or not the legislature would impose a sales tax on motor fuel and then move the money and put the money in general revenue?
I can't think of anything less popular back home than imposing another tax on gas, especially with the way gas prices are going now. I just cannot see that happening. And so anybody that's talked to me about this, I told them, don't worry about gas, because I can't think of anything that would be less popular back home than imposing another tax on gas on top of the gas tax. I just don't think that's realistic.
But if it's so politically untenable, why even include the exception to that section of the Constitution in this legislation?
Well, we're going to advance the legislation. There's going to be all kinds of amendments and things and changes that will be made. That may be one of the things that we've looked at. In fact, I've talked with MoDOT and about their concerns about it. But again, I think people back home, for us to impose more taxes on gas, I don't think that's realistic.
When you look at how this would be presented to voters, you could describe it as an income tax cut, a property tax cut, or you could describe it as a sales tax increase. And some people have described it as revenue neutral. How do you envision presenting this to voters?
Well, it's spelled out, and it says a modernization of the sales tax. And some people have implied that we're trying to trick voters. It is a modernization because you could notice a decrease in some of the sales taxes that you're paying now. There may be more things under that umbrella. There may be increases. It is a modernization. It's not just an increase in sales taxes. Some sales taxes may go down. That's an option. And the purpose of that is the legislature, if the people decide we want to do this, the next legislature comes back with the authority to do it, rolls up their sleeves and says, hey, this sales tax is too high. Let's lower it. Let's maybe add this, raise this, and have a sales tax amount that's reasonable for people back home. And then if there's any extra revenue, lower people's income, lower people's property taxes.
How are you envisioning, obviously your markup of budget just happened, how are you envisioning a budget that is going to be tighter and a little more difficult to pass than in years past?
Yeah, well, thanks, Sarah. I think one thing I forgot to mention is I think our budget chairman is doing a really great job. Our vice chair, I just have a lot of admiration for Dirk and the job that he has to do, especially in this environment. I always joke with him, I don't ever want his job, and he always tells me he would never want mine. But I appreciate the work that they did last night. I think they were here till almost midnight. The budget environment that we're experiencing now going forward is much different than the environment that we've been under for the past 5 years. We've only known surpluses, and now our chairman is tasked with finding areas where we can have savings. So I really appreciate what they're doing. I think they've taken a really thoughtful approach to a number of the different books that we have. And they were there almost till midnight last night. When we get back, we'll take up the budget that week. And then I also do expect he will drop the House Committee substitute on House Bill 19, the capital improvements, when he gets back as well. I was able to talk to him about that. And in some areas of the budget, they were able to restore some things that were cut. They were able to take a thoughtful approach to this university funding. The child care, of course, we want child care across the state. I think they've taken a thoughtful approach to that. And when we get back from spring break, we'll have a full week of budget, get through the budget, but it's a very difficult task that they have. And I really think, given the circumstances, they've been doing a really good job.
Mr. Speaker, on that note, I know that the Budget Committee hasn't gotten yet to, I believe it's 2019, House Bill 2019, but is there room for the Capital Commission to kick off with their $15 million?
Well, I think that was taken out of the supplemental, and so 2019 will drop when it gets back. It'll have to be in that book, and I don't know whether it will be in there or not. I know we do want the capital to be as nice as it can be, but I don't know that it will be in that one. That'll be up to the chairman.
Thank you.
In years past, you voted against a ban on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for transgender minors. What changed your mind for the sunset removal this year?
You know, I was talking with a Democratic representative who is on the other side of that issue, and I told her, you know, we need to stop discussing this, and she agreed with me. And so there is nobody in Missouri that thinks this is not going to be the law. It really is a settled issue that people did with their elected representatives, and it will be renewed if it comes to that. And so I don't believe that we should drag kids up here every session and make a big deal out of this. I think it's settled. They deserve some certainty, and so to eliminate the sunset and have it be permanent, I think that's the logical thing to do. And the only people it benefits are the politicians who get to discuss it. So I think it's a settled issue, and I just don't think we need to be discussing it up here.
You have a primary in your Senate campaign. How is that playing into your thoughts on that vote?
Well, politics is the last thing from my mind right now. Right now, we're just working on getting through the legislative session. I have a voting record. I'm very happy it's out there. But on this matter, I just don't think that it would ever be renewed, and so we should just make it permanent and stop talking about it every year.
The legislature could have stopped talking about it, though, because last year there was that bill the Senate passed removing a lot of sunsets, including that one. So why did the House not pick it up last year and settle the issue last year?
Well, for a number of reasons, you can't take up every bill. I just think it's important for this year we have the chance to do it. I think we should do it and stop discussing it. This is really, again, a settled issue, and it really doesn't benefit anybody for us to be discussing it every year when we all know if it came down to it, it would not be taken away.
Mr. Speaker, on relation to the income tax resolutions, why has Davidson's version taken priority? And obviously on the floor, he was the one defending the bill.
Right.
What facilitated that change?
Well, I don't have to have my name on everything. It's the second one listed. Representative Davidson has been working on this issue for all the years that he's been here. He was the floor handler. I'm happy to let him get the support. I'm happy to defend the legislation to anybody. I thought he did a really great job out there. I'm happy to meet with anybody or defend it. You know, I gave it in committee, but as it goes forward, he'll have the first name on there. But I'm going to be over in the Senate working on this thing. This is something that I really, truly believe in that will be good and transformative for Missouri. But, you know, for me, whoever gets the credit doesn't really matter as much as passing the legislation.
Mr. Speaker, the Missouri Supreme Court this week heard arguments on whether this General Assembly exceeded its constitutional authority by adopting a new congressional district map under Article 3, Section 45 and 10. Are you as confident today that you're on solid constitutional footing as you were when you did it?
I think so. I don't have any qualms about the constitutionality of mid-decade redistricting. I don't know how the courts will respond. I'm following that too, but you just never know, and we'll wait for the court's ruling. But I'm very comfortable that we were within our constitutional rights to redistrict mid-decade. Whether it was the districts were right, everybody has their chance to vote on that. But I'm very comfortable with doing it mid-decade. I think it fits within the Constitution.
The interveners suggested to the court that if that argument is accepted, you guys could do this every year. There's nothing stopping you.
Yeah.
Do you worry about that sort of thing going on here?
Well, I think politically that is one of the things that you would have to accept if you accept that it can be done mid-decade. And one of the things you might see is if a chamber or a legislature changes parties, that is something that they could take up mid-decade or anytime within the decade. And you just have to accept that as one of the consequences if you believe that this can be done. I think constitutionally it is reasonable, and if the Democrats took over the legislature in 2 years, both House and Senate, and they wanted to do it, I think you would have to accept that they could do that.
Speaking of the Supreme Court, the House passed this week basically a redo of the ballot summary language process that was struck down by the court. But this one goes further and basically says that the appellate courts and the Supreme Court can't rewrite language, only the circuit court could. What do you make of this change? Do you think that's constitutional?
Yes, I do. I think the question of constitutionality, I do think it's constitutional. I think the legislature has a right to make the laws of the state. The question of constitutionality on the previous legislation was it's being tied to the Attorney General's ability for injunctions, and that was removed. And so what we did was we brought the legislation back and just passed it on its own. I think the constitutionality was it's being tied to the injunction.
This now gives the circuit courts an ability that the appellate courts and the Supreme Court wouldn't have. So it gives one court an ability the other two. Is there concerns about that? Because that's new.
It's new, but I'm not concerned about the constitutionality of it. The constitutionality had to do with the injunctions, and that's been removed. And you can debate the merits of doing that, but I think the constitutionality is fine.
Mr. Speaker, in regard to the referendum against the Missouri First map, do you think that a referendum is constitutional against a redistrict map?
I do. I don't think anyone's questioning the constitutionality of it. I think they're questioning the timeline.
The Secretary of State has questioned the constitutionality of a referendum.
Well, I think for me the timeline is the issue, and that's being worked out in the courts. I think the ability for citizens to do referendums is pretty well known. It's just whether it gets through the system in time, and the courts will work that out, and we'll see whether they decide on it, and then the people have a vote on it. I think probably what's going to happen is that we'll have a cycle with the new maps. That's just my guess.
We've had a lot of positive statements about the budget that came out. It has a gap nearly $2 billion between revenue and spending. Why are you confident that's a good budget?
Well, we can only work with the budget and the dollars that we have. It will be a balanced budget. Going into the future, we need to have cuts so that it can remain balanced. That's the issue at this point. Missourians will have a balanced budget this year. The question of going forward, are we going to have balanced budgets? And to do that, you're right, there have to be a significant amount of cuts. I think our budget chair and the governor have made cuts, but you will need future cuts to make sure that in 2 years you still have a balanced budget.
This budget includes the biggest rearrangement of higher education funding that I've ever seen, and I've been watching this place for 40 years. It makes big winners and big losers, with some schools losing 50% of their funding and others gaining 20-25%. Why do you think that now is the appropriate time, and why do you think it should be done in the budget?
Well, you're right. It is a rearrangement, but one thing to note, it is not a decrease. The numbers for community colleges and for the four-year universities remain the same. The way that the money is distributed changed. And I actually think, I really appreciate the thoughtful approach that Representative Deaton and Representative Davidson have taken, meaning that the schools that don't have as much enrollment, what they're calling FTEs, I guess, should they get as much funding as the schools that are enrolling a lot of people? And what they are trying to say is that the money should probably be distributed proportionally to your enrollment. And so the total amount of dollars that they're distributing, I think $180 million for community colleges, over $700 million for four-year universities, those amounts are the same. It's just where they go is based upon how much enrollment that you have. And I think you can make a good case that that's the reasonable thing to do. And I appreciate them at least taking a look at it instead of just saying, well, let's just do what we've always done, give them the same amount and give them an increase. Because as we talked about earlier, with the budget gaps that are looming, there has to be areas where we're looking for cost savings.
But a school like Lincoln University here in Jefferson City has had bipartisan support to find money for their land grant match, put that in one pocket, and pull almost an equal amount out of the other pocket. Why is that fair?
Well, I think, again, based on enrollment, the universities that have more students probably need more funding. And unfortunately, in this model, you're going to have universities that are enrolling more students, getting more of the funding, and those with less getting less funding. I can't explain it any other way than it's probably more fair to distribute the money based on enrollment. And none of this is perfect. None of this is final. There's going to be robust debate on it. But I do appreciate that they're taking an approach that tries to distribute the dollars a bit more evenly based on enrollment.
Beyond the budget, what are some priorities that you have for the second half of the legislative session?
Well, I think we've gotten a number of our priorities across the line. There's that sort of imaginary threshold of getting things done. I'm also really proud that we were able to pass the A through F legislation for schools. That's over in the Senate. And so when we come back, probably the thing that we'll be looking at is, number one, getting through the budget, and then two, working with the Senate on passing our bills. We're going to send over, I think we will exceed 100 bills. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing based on what you think of our legislation. And so most of the energy will be directed to working with the Senate on passing the bills that we've sent them. I think it's probably a record, but in 2018, I think they had more bills third read. I don't know what you all were doing in 2018, but in recent years, we're going to have a record number of bills.
And speaking of the Senate, it's been slow this year so far. So, what are your thoughts on your stuff getting through in a chamber that's definitely, I think, just been a little slow this year?
Yeah, well, I think by nature that's the way the Senate works and probably should work. I think if you recall at the beginning of session, we talked about the Senate wasn't going to do anything, and they've passed two of our House bills, or three, with the supplemental. So I think it's exceeded my expectations in terms of the bills that we've done. It seems like the acrimony from last year's ending has gone down a little bit, and that they're working, and that's evidenced by them passing three of our bills, and we're going to do another one today. As with the Senate, you just never know. I've got respect for all those guys over there. I've got a lot of respect for their leadership on both sides. I think when we come back, we'll have 8 weeks, and we'll decide, do we want to do things for the people of Missouri, or do we want to obstruct and grandstand? And I'm optimistic that we'll work together and get a lot of the bills done.
Mr. Speaker, a pair of Democrats last week testified in committee that they were slipped date rape drugs last session. Was this the first you'd heard of lawmakers suspecting they were drugged in Jefferson City? And are you looking at any changes either to security or policy in response?
Yes, it was troubling to hear or read that story that a couple of members thought they might possibly have been subjected to that. It seems like it was outside of work. But I expect that they would pursue criminal investigations. I just want them and everybody to know I support them 1,000% on doing that, whatever they need on that. And it's very troubling to hear. That's the first I've heard of anything like that in Jefferson City, and I hope that they're pursuing criminal investigations. And then if they need anything here at the Capitol, I'm with them 100% on that. And then I think one of the representatives has proposed legislation even and has had a hearing and really supporting her in that as well.
As a doctor, I'd like to get your input on some bills that have been filed this session dealing with nurse practitioners. Basically, it's the collaborating doctor and the nurse practitioners in trying to increase access, especially in rural areas where there's a doctor shortage. I'm curious what you think about giving the nurse practitioners more power to be able to help address a need to healthcare access.
Well, I don't think it's about power, really. I think if you look at Missouri, there's a shortage of healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, all across the spectrum. And that's something that I see. I think if you call to get an appointment with a primary care physician in eastern Jackson County, it'll probably be 6 months if you can get in at all. So the shortage of healthcare providers is something that I'm acutely aware of. One of the things that always comes up is there's not enough doctors to go around. Should we expand the scope of practice for nurses? That's something that I've supported in the past. I think 2 years ago, we expanded the mileage for collaboration. And that's something that we're looking at. I think you can look at both sides of it and make sure that people are getting good, high-quality care. At the same time, they're getting the access to it. So that's a debate, and there's a number of bills that are filed. I think there are some moving in the Senate. But I'm open to looking at all of it, just as we have in the past. If you recall the legislation that we passed 2 years ago to do just that, expanded the mileage a little bit, hopefully got more people the care they need.
So as far as that goes, do you know, like, if the doctor groups support this or don't support this type of thing with opening up the nurse practitioner scope of training and practice?
Well, I think doctors support getting people care, and I'm not sure they're a monolithic group. I think some would support legislation like that, some don't. And it's just a matter of everybody getting into a room and with the legislative days that we have, looking at legislation, seeing if they can come to a common compromise. And we're always working on that. I think there's bills moving over there in the Senate. We've had some hearings on bills over here regarding eye doctors. And so that's something that we're constantly looking at.
Is the opposition about the money?
I don't think it's necessarily about the money. I think it's about the quality of care that people receive and making sure that whether you're in rural Missouri or in Jackson County or in the cities, you're getting the same level of high quality care.
Back to my last question on property taxes. So obviously the one from Representative Taylor is on its way over to the Senate.
Yeah.
There's another one, because basically the omnibus bill got split into two.
Yeah.
And Representative Keithley has the other one, which deals with a lot of the election issues, including all property tax issues through November. What are your thoughts on that bill? I know it hasn't been perfected yet. Is there more concern about that than the other one?
Well, I think it has a few more of the more controversial aspects. I support that bill too. I think if we're going to be making decisions on taxes, it should be at election times where people are voting. And I know there are some arguments about, well, people just can't, there's so many things on the ballot. I believe in Missourians. I believe in our ability to look at the ballot and answer one more question about something that really affects everybody in the county, and that's property taxes. So I support that legislation. It's probably a more difficult piece to pass, but I'd like to see that one pass as well.
So there's a bill on the House calendar where it create a crime out of mass intimidation, sort of targeting protesters or demonstrators. In some other states, we've seen bills prohibiting masks on ICE agents or law enforcement officers. Missouri's not taking that approach. It's really the opposite approach. I wonder if you could speak to that.
I think it just speaks to the kind of the priorities that you have, whether you're pro law enforcement or whether you're pro the other side. And I think in Missouri we're definitely pro law enforcement. But I have noted that it's somewhat interesting that some states want to ban the masking of criminals, others want to ban the masking of law enforcement.
Okay, Light, I have another question. I've noticed that, speaking kind of on that thread, that there haven't really been immigration bills going through the House this year. Is there a reason for that, or kind of your approach to that?
Well, I'm not sure that, immigration being a federal issue, it's harder for us to address. I think there are some in terms of SNAP benefits for undocumented people. I've seen legislation for that. But yeah, we've been busy. That just hasn't been one of the issues. But I think House Republicans are very much for legalized immigration and stopping illegal immigration.
Mr. Speaker, one issue that seems to not have gotten a ton of discussion yet are potential solutions to the jail competency wait list, which continues to grow.
The what wait list?
The jail competency wait list, people who've been ruled incompetent to stand trial.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. There has been a bill sponsored by Representative Crossley and others on assisted outpatient treatment,
Yes.
involuntary outpatient
Yes.
treatment. Do you expect that bill to get a lot of traction, and do you think there will be more discussion on this issue?
I hope so. I referred that bill, I think, a few weeks ago, and Republicans filed it, and a Democrat, Representative Crossley. I do believe in it. It's been referred. I hope it gets a hearing and moves, but I do support that. And even though it was a Democrat that filed it first, Representative Crossley, I think that doesn't matter so much as it's good legislation, and we should move it. And then in terms of, that brings up a point, in terms of the bipartisan nature of what we're doing, I looked at the statistics. I think 60 Democrats have had, or 60 Democrat bills have been referred to committee. 32 have had hearings. One has even been TAFP'd. So again, I think I'm actually very proud that we've been able to work in a bipartisan manner. It's probably a record in terms of Democrat bills referred and heard. But again, if they're good pieces of legislation, I don't mind whether it's a Democrat or a Republican that passes a bill.
Will there be a floor vote on the abortion measure, the death penalty measure? The Archbishop of St. Louis was here this week, and they talked about it getting voted out at committee. Would you bring that to the floor?
I think it will get voted out of committee. They're planning on that. And then just with the time when we come back with 8 weeks, with all the other things that have to do, I don't know that we'll get a floor vote this year. It's something that I believe in, but I'm not sure it'll get a floor vote.
I'd like to ask one more question about the healthcare shortage.
Yes.
I've heard the term artificial shortage used, especially on the doctor side. Are you trying in any way to open up more residency spots to help with this, specifically the doctor shortage?
You were all about the doctors this morning. I like that, Alyssa. We need more residency spots. That's a CMS thing. The legislature has acted recently, and we have sponsored residency spots of our own, family medicine, primary care spots. I think we could use probably 100 more of those, and unfortunately it's a matter of funding. But a lot of those spots are being taken up currently. You have people training to be primary care doctors. Hopefully they'll stay in Missouri, but I'd love to see 100 more GME spots. Unfortunately, it's just about funding, and given the budget environment, probably not feasible. But we have addressed that, and I'd love to see more of it.
In regard to data centers in Missouri, there's a number of bills that have been, at least one I think that has been heard. I don't know if it was exactly out of the House Utilities Committee to put guardrails on data centers, but still allowing them. I believe that came out of the House Future Caucus, Representative Wellenkamp. But there's also been some federal pushback, specifically from Senator Josh Hawley. What is your position on how Missouri should go about, embracing data centers or shutting them?
Well, as long as Missourians love to be on their phones and scroll and send messages and look on Instagram and all those things, we need data centers at some place around the country. I think our approach should be to make sure that it's done in a smart way, in a way that protects consumers and the environment. But to say that Missouri shouldn't have data centers, I don't think is a wise thing. We've got a data center that's being proposed in Jackson County. In Independence, I think the tax benefits to the citizens would be about $35 million a year to a city that has a budget of $80 million. That would be transformative. So I don't think we should say we shouldn't have data centers, but I do think there needs to be protections for consumers, the environment, and taxpayers. And I think if you do it in a smart way, both sides can benefit. But as long as we love to be on our phones, data centers are going to continue to expand.
Last time I checked, Representative Camp's bill wasn't referred to committee. Has that changed now, or is that still kind of?
His data center bill? There's a number of data center bills. I think you, Damon, referenced one of them. I'm not sure that we need legislation. That's something we can look at in the future, and it's an evolving thing. But yeah, a number of members have filed legislation on data centers. It just, I think, our data and streaming and all those things are pretty important to people's lives, and there's going to just be more data centers. And so I don't think Missouri should miss out on that, but should be smart about the way we implement it.
Data centers are high-value, low-employment installations. Should local governments be giving big tax abatements in order to get them in their communities?
I think in terms of the tax treatment of data centers, local government should look and see what makes sense, what the benefits are, and decide for themselves. That's one of the debates that we're seeing in Jackson County, and citizens that have opposed the data centers and citizens that want the data centers for the financial benefits are really having a conversation about it. But I support the locals having a say and deciding if they think it's best for their communities. One of the other things that people bring up all the time are the utilities, and I think what we passed in Senate Bill 4, there were protections in that so that your utility rates aren't going to go up just because of the data centers. But you're right, they're not a lot of jobs except for the construction of them, but I think overall, given the world we live in with streaming, it can be a benefit to the locals, and they just have to decide for themselves.
Mr. Speaker, Randy Beacon, on that data center note, I mean, we are seeing large local community pushback on even in independence on these data centers.
Yeah.
I know, we're talking about putting guardrails in place, but how do you balance the concerns that a lot of these communities really are opposed to these data centers with making sure you're attracting economic opportunities to the state?
Yeah, I just think you just have to weigh both sides, and I get it. They're probably ugly. They don't look great. They don't have a lot of jobs there, but there are tax benefits, obviously, and we're seeing that on the independent side. And what you're seeing are citizens that are opposed and citizens that are for it. They're working with their elected officials and are deciding, I think, that process already went through in independence, and they're still trying to decide it. But I think their elected officials have decided it would be a benefit, and locals just working together and figuring out a solution. That's what it's all about, and I'm confident they can do it.
Are you confident utility costs won't go through the roof for everybody else in the community?
I'm confident they won't because of data centers. You're seeing increases in utilities just because of the world we live in, just the demands that we have overall on everything, not just data centers. But I think the legislation we passed last year protects spikes in energy costs because of data centers.
To that regard, Mr. Speaker, I know there are bills in both chambers that would expand competition among some utility providers. Should there be more competition in areas where some utility companies in the state have what's realistically a monopoly right now?
Yeah, I've seen legislation, and I think it was even heard in committee last year to expand the options that people have instead of just the investor-owned. I think that's an interesting idea, and I think you'll hear about it more in the future. I think if you look at other states, sometimes that doesn't add up to people saving costs on energy. And then other states, they do realize the benefit. I think if you live in Pennsylvania, you have 100 different options for an energy provider. And so I think that's something that you'll continue to hear about in the future. We may even have a hearing this session, but it's an interesting idea. But I think after Senate Bill 4, let's just see how things are going and make sure that energy costs are as affordable as they can be for Missourians.
I know some of the lobbyists who are pushing those bills have argued that the existing utility companies are major donors and have bought out lawmakers. Is that a factor that will play into whether or not legislation like that would pass?
Well, I think talk like that you can say about anything. I think the members here, the members on the utility committee, are here to do the right thing and aren't really swayed by that. Of course, that's all part of politics, but I think what we're doing here members are really looking at the issues on their own merits, and I'm not concerned about that.
Mr. Speaker, I believe earlier when I referenced bills in committee, I was thinking of the several nuclear power bills that had gone through the Utilities Committee.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking
Okay.
of. Obviously, a big part of the reason for expanding the energy grid would be to provide energy for the data centers, but in regard to expanding nuclear energy, the governor said, you know, Missouri's all in for nuclear, all in for AI. But there hasn't seemed to be a lot of movement on the House floor when it comes to pushing for nuclear energy.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely for nuclear energy as well. I'm for energy of all kinds. I'm not sure you necessarily need legislation to do it. But if there is, I'd love to pursue it, because I think that's one of the areas that we need to pursue in the future to power Missouri, just because of the demand that keeps going up every year. We want new businesses to come in. We want them factories, manufacturing. All that takes energy, and I think nuclear is part of it.
Mr. Speaker, I hate to interrupt this, but I know you have a meeting at 9:45.
Oh, okay. One of the things that we didn't discuss that I wanted to touch upon was we've talked about budget cuts. I was really proud of our budget chairman restoring the self-directed services. That was a big issue, and that's just one of the ways that I think shows that we're really responsive to citizens, at least in the House. We heard from our citizens, and we said that's something that really deserves to be funded. So I think they restored it all, or put it back in with the governor's cuts there. And so was really proud to see that happen. That's just one example of our budget chairman really responding to the needs of our citizens.
One of the arguments I've heard said with SDS and the day rehab is this is a bipartisan thing within the legislature, but the governor could do whatever the governor wants. And so if he vetoes it, would you push for a veto override in September?
Well, let's not talk about veto overrides or anything. I think our governor, he's a great governor. I think he would work with the legislature on that. But I'm not thinking about any overrides or anything. I think we can all come to an agreement and compromise, and look forward to working with the Senate on that and the governor. But I don't think we're looking at veto overrides yet. One last question?
Before you go, it had become a tradition for you to meet with all of us on a weekly basis at the end of every week. The Democrats keep showing up for that. The Republicans have not. Have you done one of these since the governor's speech? I don't know if you have. But in any event, it hasn't been every week. Is there a reason for that?
Well, nobody needs to see my face or hear my voice more than they need to. I think Ashley does a great job. She's got a routine. For me, I'm accessible to all of you. I just don't think I need to be up here and you know, on camera. Nobody needs much of that. But I'm always happy to meet with you all, answer questions. I think a lot of you have my cell, and we work with press to get you what you need. As a former newspaper person, I really do value making sure that the media has access to their elected officials. But yeah, I'm not sure a weekly press conference is really needed. And obviously, I'm happy to answer any questions. Have we been 45 minutes? Time flies when you're having fun. All right? All right. Thanks, guys.